Hello, Pokemon fans, and today we are going to be getting into the last round of our Orlando Premier Challenge. Just to say it again, my name is Taylor Curry, and I am joined here today by Dimitri Warren, and we are going to be casting your last round and also the top cut of this Premier Challenge.
Yep. And we're looking at a pretty interesting little bit coming up. Like I said, last round, where I really think last round is pretty pivotal for a lot of players. Now is really you're in or you're out. You got to do good now or you're done. And so we're finally, we'll have a pretty good example of that in this final round match today on stream. But, after that, we're going to go into top cut and ultimately see, how this tournament's going to go. Again, a lot of our big names that have come here today, they've done great. We're going to get to see a whole lot here in top cut. And I'm really excited to see ultimately, what this final round means for our top cut, how it's going to be affecting everyone's mentalities here going in and then going out of the tournament.
Right, exactly. I do feel like that this is the round that people have to worry about. I feel like this is like the win and in round.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it is. There's not really anywhere else to put it. You're in or you're out now, and you got to make, you got to decide: are you in this? Are you going to keep going, or are you going to get stomped? And that sometimes can't happen, especially in the last round. You got to really be, anything can happen, and I think last round is a better epitome of that than anything.
Right, exactly. Even if you do like lose your first round, you still have like possibly two more to really like make it up. And I feel like that this round, I'm really hoping that we just get like a really close and just really exciting game.
Yeah, I want to see it be pretty close too. I want to really see both players bring the best that they have and see exactly what's going to be going down for the two of them. And, I'm particularly interested to see with how our teams have been lately. Things have been very, very interesting. So, yeah, we got Jackson McMillan carrying in Dondozo and Tatsugiri, as well as Iron Hand, Sylveon, Hisuian, Alolan Ninetales, and Chen Pao. And then over on Colton Wedge's side, we have Grimmsnarl, Galarian Moltres, Hisuian Gudra, Water Ogerpon, let's see, Annihilate and Sinestcha. So this is a super interesting round team-wise. I'm really interested to see. I got to see a little bit of Jackson's team a little bit ago, and I was pretty excited about it. Yeah, that's my boy right there. And so I got to see a little bit, and that was pretty exciting. And I love Dondozo and Tatsugiri. I think it's a pretty fun thing. And, I'm really particularly interested to see how Sylveon does in this matchup, especially if it becomes relevant in the Hisuian Gudra side of things and, kind of cleaning it up, because Sylveon is just such a good special damage dealer. You know what I mean?
Right, exactly. And I do feel like that Sylveon can pack a punch. I mean, it won the senior division last Worlds.
Absolutely, yeah. It can really put in some work. It's been hard ever since Fluttermane joined, just because Fluttermane is such a good mon. But I think Sylveon definitely has the potential to really make up for some nice stuff and really does some more interesting things that Fluttermane just can't do.
Exactly. So I am really excited to see really just how also Alolan Ninetales does.
Yeah, Alolan Ninetales. I think Alolan Ninetales. I think is one of the most underrated mons in the meta at the moment. And that obviously that's very much my own personal opinion. I just think Aurora Veil with the Light Clay and just how good of a mon it is all around. It's very, very nice to make everything else in your team much bulkier. And honestly, we're seeing a pretty interesting ditto here too with the Grimmsnarl versus the Alolan Ninetales, where we both have screens teams.
Yes.
And I find that pretty exciting. I want to see exactly if Grimmsnarl is able to who's the premier screen setter? That's the fight I'm looking at here. That's who I'm seeing going up against each other. And then on top of that, I really want to see, I want to see the Sylveon. I want to see the Sylveon put in work. And I want to see how the Galarian Moltres does. Because we actually have a couple people up in Jax who do play a lot of the Galarian Moltres. And it can get some damage on the board. It is nothing to sneeze at. And the typings confuse me a good bit whenever I get in the zone.
And especially when you most of the time accidentally proc that Berserk, it can get into some, when it's on the opposing side of what you're playing, it can get nasty.
It has some really nasty hijinks, and you really got to be careful with it. So, I'm really interested to see what both of these players bring. I love both of their team building. This is two of the coolest teams I think I've seen today. And, I really want to see both of them do well, and I really want to see both of them in top cut. I know I can't have both, but man, it's really cool. I really like their teams, and I really like how original both of these players are with both of these things.
I am obviously going to be rooting for the Sylveon just as a Sylveon lover myself, but I am really excited to see how another Hisuian Goodra is going to do, and I have not actually seen a lot of Annihilate this regulation.
No, and I mean, that's for a good reason. I mean, you have King Gambit running around. I mean, you have a lot of like potential big threats to Annihilate, but so much flying type coverage.
Right.
And that's really one of the only things that can really hit Annihilate hard. You just really got to be careful about it. So, yeah, I mean, both of the players, they're both feeling pretty good going into this. I mean, there's a bit of stress here. You're in or you're out. You win and you're in. You don't, it's over.
Right.
And so, we're going to see some pretty happy emotions here and some pretty sad ones here, no matter what happens. And, ultimately, I just hope it's a good game, and I hope both of our players give it their all. And, why wouldn't they? This is some of the best matches. This is the best time to watch. They're both going all out, and, it's now or never,
Right, and I also saw on Colton's team that his Sinistcha is sporting a Life Dew, and that's something that I don't normally see on a Sinistcha, but I think that is a really good pick in order to support the rest of the team.
I see it sometimes every now and then. It adds a lot of good, survivability and, again, more bulk to, this time it'll be more into Cole's team, so I'm really interested to see. These are two pretty bulky teams all in all, actually, as I'm looking back at these two. Like, these are both pretty big boys. We got Dondozo and Tatsugiri on one side, Hisuian Goodra. There's a lot of really interesting dynamics here on both sides of the teams.
Right, and I think we're about to get into our game one of our last round of Swiss.
Awesome. Here we go.
And that is going to be the Alolan Ninetales and the Chien-Pao on Jackson's side, and the Grimmsnarl and the Wellspring Ogerpon on Colton's side. This is definitely going to be a battle of the screens.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, right out the gates, I would say that Jackson has a bit more of a nice little advantage here. The Ice types are good into Ogerpon. You already have that Ice type defense boost for both of his Mons that are currently on the field at the moment, and, Colton isn't able to profit off of that. The Ogerpon does, however, it can be pretty risky as to, if it's really going to be useful. We're going to see the Ice Spinner come out into the Grimmsnarl, and, it's going to do about, I'd say about a third of health. We're going to see a Moonblast fly into the Grimmsnarl as well. Oh, but it just survives.
That Grundle is quite very strong, or should I say Grimmsnarl, and that Ogerpon does quite a bit of damage into that Chien-Pao.
Yeah, that was a pretty interesting scenario watching it go down. If I'm being honest, I really liked seeing kind of how basically a lot of those things really should have killed, but we're already seeing the benefits of the screens being put up by things and the defense boosts. And, everybody's a Pokemon in this part of the game at this point.
Exactly.
We're going to see both of these guys go on for probably a while, if I'm being honest. I mean, we're looking at two teams built around bulk, and then bulky mons to take advantage of that bulk even more. So we have a lot of HP to get through.
And it's just so nice to see how, wow.
It's like an Ivy Cudgel going into that neutral damage. Like, even it's Chien-Pao. Like, it's crazy to see it survive stuff like that.
Yeah, it's just so nice to see Ice types getting that sort of extra, advantages with, Snow being set, from a Snow setter, such as Abominous Snow, or even better now, Alolan Ninetales, and it's just so nice to see them getting a little bit more of defense.
Absolutely, big time. And I mean, Ice type was in need of a pretty big, overhaul for a long time now, but that Ice Spinner certainly does not do much to that Hisuian Goodra. And it looks like the Ogerpon is actually very importantly going to miss that speed drop and that Ice type damage going into it. So now we're going to see it come out with an Ivy Cudgel, and it's going to go right back into the Chien-Pao, taking it out of the game.
Yes, that was a really good turn on Colton's part, because if that Ogerpon had gotten hit with the Icy Wind, that probably would have done, still a little bit more damage, but it would have been a speed drop. And thankfully that speed drop on the Hisuian Goodra doesn't matter too much, because it can probably be said that the Hisuian Goodra is probably the slowest thing on the field right now.
Absolutely, yeah. It's the slowest thing in the field, but it's also definitely the bulkiest.
Definitely.
Even with the Ice-type boost for Ninetales, and honestly the Aurora Veil, yeah, Ninetales can take some hits, but we just watched a Shelter go off in that Goodra. Goodra is going to be very hard to take off the field from here on in.
Yes, especially if you're able to spam those shelters and be able to take other hits from the opposing Pokemon. You're going to be really able, if you're wanting to go on more of the offensive side, you're going to be able to dish out quite some damage with Body Press.
Absolutely. And we see the Moonblast go into the Goodra, and it just really isn't able to get much off. We see the Wild Charge come out into the Ogerpon, and that's only going to end up in a little bit of chip damage coming back at hands.
So kind of like a nothing turn for the Iron Hands, but I do feel like that Iron Hands is still in a pretty good position. it is still very bulky, and it's going to benefit even more from those screens with the bulk that it already has.
Absolutely. And I think a thing to keep an eye on for the rest of this game is that, if Jackson can preserve his Alolan Ninetales, the screens are going to be invaluable here. We have two bulky things. Jackson needs to remain just as bulky as that Goodra to keep on taking it down.
Right, exactly. And another Icy Wind is going to be going, and it hits both of them.
So it definitely doesn't do as much in the Ogerpon as I thought.
Right, yeah, and it does get that speed drop on the Ogerpon. And the Ogerpon's going to go for another Ivy Cudgel, doing quite a bit of damage, a lot more than what I was going to think for screens.
Compared to what I'm used to, yeah, beyond the shadow of a doubt. We do see Drain Punch heal back a bit, but I don't think that heals back quite as much as what the Ivy Cudgel did there. We do see a Heavy Slam go into Alolan Ninetales, and that just about kills it. We're also seeing Snow drop now, so that means that Alolan Ninetales is probably going to have to keep moving if it wants to get the screen set up again when it goes down. But Jackson does have it for a couple more turns, so, he has a little bit of safety.
Yeah, I really don't know who's really in a better position right now.
It's really tight, and they're both so bulky.
Right. It's just going to be a battle of the bulk, just dishing out chip damage.
Yeah, they're both going to have to go all out to really break through either side of this, and I'm really excited to see it. But again, we're also going to be here for a while. I'm not excited for how bulky some of these guys are, because as you can see, Goodra is just not taking much. It's just going and going and going. We do see the Drain Punch go out of the Iron Hands and into the Goodra, meaning that the Ogerpon wasn't able to get off as much as it probably would have hoped. We do see Life Dew come out, and that's going to be a pretty huge HP buff. Wow, and the waters are also proccing along with the health regen over onto Ogerpon as well. That's so cool.
Yeah, that's actually really cool synergy. But
yeah, so now we're going to see, getting Goodra off the field is going to be a problem for Jackson, I think. I think Goodra, with the HP regen that it has and everything, on top of all of the bulk that he's already, that Colton's already invested, it's going to be a lot for Jackson to get through.
I feel like that, whenever you see a Mon that's, really bulky and really hard to get off the field, you're just like, oh, I want to save this for last. But the thing is if you save it for last and you don't touch it, it could easily go for a whole bunch of shelters and be able to get one-hit KO so many Mons with Body Press.
Precisely, and that's already what we're seeing basically. I mean, obviously Goodra had the super effective advantage against Alolan Ninetales, but it took Alolan Ninetales out. So Jackson's now down to his last two Mons, and he's still really struggling to be able to deal with that Hisuian Goodra. As it just kind of continues to gain momentum. That seems what Hisuian Goodra is all about, is just gaining momentum.
Right. But now that Sylveon is going to be hitting the field, and I absolutely love that shiny, and I really hope that it can dish out some really good damage that could potentially put Jackson in the lead, even though Colton's Hisuian Goodra is looking like that it might actually win him the game with just how bulky it is.
Yeah, I mean, that's Hisuian Goodra for you. However, Hisuian Goodra is not going to be absorbing that special side of Sylveon's Hyper Voice as well. Yeah, like I said, it's getting off a bit more damage, but not quite enough to really kill off either Ogerpon or Hisuian Goodra. And now Ogerpon also gets some of that regen back, so Colton's definitely keeping all of his Mons in the game as long as he can help it.
Right, and that Hisuian Goodra also goes for the Life Dew, and it procs its Water Resort once again, and they are back to, I think, where they used to be at the beginning of the start.
Yeah, I mean, things are very much so just about where they were before. Although we do see now that Colton's, but that was a special side of screen, has now dropped.
Right, and that Sylveon is now locked into the Hyper Voice, but I still think that with that Pixelate ability, it is still such a good move. And that Iron Hands once again goes for the Drain Punch. And
we're also going to see a lot more damage come out of Hyper Voice too because of that screen drop.
Right.
Let's see what it does. It's going to bounce off the Ogerpon's Protect. And it still does a good bit. I mean, there's still about a quarter of damage, but it is going to go for the Body Press. Oh my gosh. Iron Hands just barely survives that with 1 HP. That is absolutely insane.
Oh my goodness.
Wow. Now we are going to see, however, Jackson, maybe it's not as relevant for Iron Hands, but he does now lose his screen, so his Sylveon is going to be much more susceptible to damage.
Yeah, and this just might be Colton's game.
Yeah, it definitely looks like Colton's probably running away with it, but I mean, Jackson has absolutely put up an absolutely amazing fight here. I really am impressed with how good all of his stuff has been, especially the Iron Hands being able to survive something like that.
Right.
I was sure it was dead.
Right, exactly. I mean, just surviving on 1 HP is great.
Yeah, I mean, it keeps him standing. Ultimately, I don't know how much more value he will be able to get out of Iron Hands. With the Ogerpon switching out, Hands will be doing more damage, but it's also going to be using the Sinestro to heal up Goodra more.
Oh, yeah. That Goodra is not getting off the field. I can say that now.
Yeah, I mean, that's Goodra for you. We're going to see another Drain Punch come out. Hands getting a bit of HP back, which actually could be a pretty big deal for Hands in the long run. I mean, we saw it live on very little HP just a moment ago. We have to see how the two of them do. That was a lot of damage over onto the Goodra, and Sylveon survives a heavy slam. That could be a very pivotal moment for Jackson.
That's actually really good for Jackson because I was almost certain that heavy slam was going to one-hit KO it, but I think I'm honestly just more used to Flutter Mane and it not being as bulky as it used to be in later regulations, since a lot of people were running bulky Flutter Manes.
Absolutely, yeah. And with that Goodra being slower, it really Colton was risking a lot there by switching out Sinestro.
Oh, and now that Sinestro is going to go for a Matcha Gotcha, meaning that it is the fastest thing
and
on
Sylveon barely lives. Oh my God. That actually could be a very important survive right there for Jackson. At the very least, this is immaculately played by Jackson.
Yes. Oh, but the burn, but it doesn't affect it.
The burn it doesn't affect its damage, but it
Right.
will probably kill him at the end of this turn, so this does mean that then it is Colton's game.
Yeah, but still really well played
Absolutely
from both.
amazingly played. That ultimately probably came down to the burn chance.
Yeah, exactly. But I feel like that Jackson was able to get some information from this game knowing, okay, this Goodra is going to be really hard to kill.
Absolutely, yeah. So, going into the next game, Jackson really needs to think about, what is he going to do with that Goodra? He's got to take it out as quick as possible.
Right.
He's got to be very, very fast about it.
And I feel like that if Colton does lead with Hisuian Goodra, I feel like that Jackson's probably going to switch over his priority to making sure that it gets off the field.
Colton believes in the Goo to go up one game. And I mean, yeah, every time we've streamed Goodra has done very well. And I've thought that way about Goodra this whole time. I think Goodra is such a good mon. And it, like I said, it can win you games.
Yes.
Without even really worrying about it.
Yeah, right. You can just spam shelters and then just go for a body press or a heavy slam every once in a while.
Yeah,
And
but it's not just the simplicity; it's also the meta that we find ourselves in with how physically dominated it is at the moment. It's just it's so good.
And Hisuian Goodra just eats physical attackers up.
Absolutely, yeah. And so, I mean, there's quite a few things that both teams could go about here. I mean, it was a lot of fun to see, some of the less bulky mons on each of their teams, actually. I guess we got to see Hisuian Goodra, but, I did want to see some Galarian Moltres there. I think it could potentially be good, but you do got to keep in mind the Sylveon and the not Hisuian, I get those two, the Alolan Ninetales.
Right.
So it is pretty threatened by a lot of those things too, I suppose. But that makes it not as good of a pick for Colton's side.
Right, and I almost wonder if Jackson is gonna switch up his lead even more, and maybe even go for a Dondozo Tatsugiri. I'm not entirely sure how it would go into Colton's Hisuian Goodra.
When it comes down to it, Dondozo is a pretty powerful mon, and I actually believe. I get the abilities a little bit confused with Dondozo because I'm not as much of a avid Dondozo player myself, but he could potentially overcome. We do see Dondozo coming out right in the beginning with Annihilate and Grimmsnarl on the other side. But as I was saying, like Dondozo really could be a big deal when it comes down to its ability because Goodra can't adapt to that. It's something that Dondozo can overcome. It's just not very effective with it typically, and that could be what the issue is.
Right, and I do believe that it is also Clear Amulet. I don't know how much that really affects this game, but it is a really interesting item to see on a Dondozo since we normally see like leftovers or I think really only leftovers.
Yeah, big time. We do see, we're getting Colton on his side get screen set up, and then we're seeing a Wave Crash come into it. Oh, but Grimmsnarl just survives, meaning he will likely be able to get off the second screen next turn.
That is actually pretty good to get Grimmsnarl to that low HP, but it's still going to be able to stick around to set up probably one more screen.
Yeah, well, I think that's the important part of Grimmsnarl is that he's gotten the screen set up and he survived long enough to do it.
Exactly, because I mean, like, once Grimmsnarl's KO'd, it's gotten those screens up, it's done its job.
Absolutely, yeah. So, and I think Colton knows that as, even though Grimmsnarl's going down, Annihilate is also going to have to prepare himself to take a good bit of damage.
Right. It is going to go for the Drain Punch into the Sylveon, but it does only a little bit, even though that was a crit.
Yeah, and that would potentially be great for, a lot of things in terms of, HP recovery and whatnot. And now we're going to see Colton send out Hisuian Goodra. So now it's it's time for Jackson to figure out exactly what do I do here? How do I deal with this? What's it gonna take to bring this thing down?
Exactly. I do feel like that the Sylveon is going to be a big player in this, especially threatening super effective damage onto that Annihilate. But I do not know how Jackson could deal with that Hisuian Goodra.
He definitely has some options, I think. He just has to play his cards right. I'm really interested to see mostly how the Dondozo comes out to handle it, which I think will ultimately be the play.
Exactly. I did forget that he switched his Dondozo out. My bad.
Yeah, no, you're good. I mean, he did not go down. Dondozo is still in play, and with Annihilate going Terra Fire, that makes Dondozo honestly seem even better.
Yeah, that actually really does. And now Alolan Ninetales does go for that Aurora Veil, which will be really nice against that Annihilate, which is going to be Rage Fisting that Sylveon, and it only does like a tiny little chunk.
Which doesn't surprise me. I mean, we see the Aurora Veil coming into play right there, keeping Alolan Ninetales in the game for another turn. But also, had Annihilate, I forgot what I was going to say there. My bad. But, Alolan Ninetales survived off of, had she not set up that Aurora Veil, she would have died
Exactly.
there. And now that's going to carry over into momentum for Dondozo.
Exactly. I do think that both players are in really good positions because of how much bulk that both players have on both of their sides. It's really hard to figure out.
And they're both utilizing it very interestingly. We see an Icy Wind come out into the Hisuian Goodra and the Annihilate, dropping both of their speeds, but Annihilate's Defiant will then proc, giving him a very nice attack boost. Also boosting his Rage Fit now that he's been hit a couple times by, both of these moves. This is probably going to kill even through anything.
And you are right. It does kill the Sylveon.
Yeah, sorry about that. I know you love Sylveon.
Oh, no, it's all right. I'm just very excited to see Hisuian Goodra also getting this much usage and being able to dish out damage and just be extremely tanky as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And so now we're going to see a pretty interesting transition into the latter half of this game, I think, where, it's time for us to see the thing we've all been waiting for. And you know what it is. It's Dondozo and Tatsugiri. I really want to see if these two can, ultimately reach out to meet Goodra and its super defensively bulky thing. With Aurora Veil set up for them, they're in very, very nice position at the moment.
Exactly. I do feel like that with Annihilate being Terrifier, just like you said, Wave Crash is going to do significantly a lot more damage.
Absolutely, yeah. And so we'll just have to see how it goes. Can Dondozo pull this out for Jackson, or will Colton be able to, reevaluate what he's got to do?
And will the Hisuian Goodra be able to do anything in retaliation of Dondozo hurting its friend Annihilate?
But Annihilate's not taking any damage yet because he does throw up a Protect.
And the Dondozo actually goes for an Earthquake.
Tatsugiri avoided the attack. I didn't see that coming.
Oh.
And, we're going to see Goodra just take that straight-up ground-type damage. And it is in the red, which is the first time.
Oh, but then there's
right
the
back
Life
out. Leave it to Hisuian Goodra. He's never feeling bad. He's always at least pulling himself out of there. We do see Annihilate come back up to green as the snow also comes to a halt.
Yeah, I mean, with that Life Dew to support, it's just able to make Hisuian Goodra just so much more tanky and just so much more of a support, support mon for his team, as well as being able to provide offense. I just think it's just very versatile.
He's keeping his boys alive, and you can't blame him for that,
Right, exactly. So now Hisuian Goodra is going to be going back to Colton, and we are going to be seeing the Senesha, which is going to provide a little bit more health to the Annihilate.
Yeah, and I mean, that'll be nice. It'll probably help the Annihilate survive this. It should still do that. We'll have to see exactly, how this goes down for Dondozo here. Yeah, but the +2 just isn't enough. I think Colton was really trying hard to invest in keeping that Annihilate alive, but that Wave Crash was a big deal. It ultimately brought him down here. So it ultimately brought him down here. So, it definitely puts Jackson in a much better position and makes Dondozo feel a bit better here.
Right, exactly. Dondozo, even since Regulation A, it's just been so strong, and I feel like it even holds up now in Regulation E. Just like Goldango, it just pops up.
Absolutely, yeah. So now we got to see, if Jackson's able to kind of keep this momentum and keep going in order to, ultimately take this game back from Colton.
Right, or will Colton be able to use his Hisuian Goodra once again to just keep his team alive and really just see a 2-0 game?
What's the next share around? Goodra becomes much, much, much harder to kill.
Exactly. And even though that move was super effective, it is still in the red. It is not. Oh, now the Sin is just using Life Dew.
So much life due this game. Colton really, he's doing a great job making sure his guys stay alive and that, he keeps on doing the work. See a body press come out into Dondozo, but it really doesn't do much as Dondozo is pretty much just ready for the Hisuian Goodra.
Yeah, that body press was just like a little tap on the Dondozo.
Exactly, but it's not wholly worth investing into the shelters because Dondozo, again, I'm not super experienced with the abilities, but I'm pretty sure Dondozo just ignores the Goodra's defense raises. Now, Goodra just barely survives there, which means that it's probably going to be able to stick around. We're going to see Machagacha come out, and obviously Tatsugiri gets out of the way, but this burn for Dondozo, that could be potentially lethal. Doesn't burn, it doesn't seem, but it does seem like Sinestro does get a little bit of HP back on herself.
And now Life Dew's coming out once again.
And it's just like what we talked about there. I mean, Dondozo could be in a position to kill it next turn, depending on how Jackson plays it. But, it's still not going to be an easy game from there. Sure, he has Tatsugiri still in Dondozo's mouth, but Dondozo is still not in the greatest position.
Right, and that Dondozo, I feel like, is in range of one more Machagacha, and then it's only gonna. Then I wouldn't be surprised if he is able to KO the Hisuian Goodra, it would be a 1v1 against the Sinistcha and the Tatsugiri.
Big time, which we actually really could be seeing going into this game. We really got to see, ultimately what plays out here. But the Goodra does go down, meaning Jackson has the more defensive threat here. Another Machagacha's coming out. Again, this burn could be lethal if it doesn't kill Dondozo now. Yep. All right. So Dondozo's now down, and we're going to see basically Tatsugiri versus Colton, which I believe is just a Sinestcha, correct?
Yes. I think it's only his Sinestcha.
Yeah. So as we go into this, I mean, we definitely have some interesting things going down. I do believe that Jackson still has his, what do you call it? Both of his screens up, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
I do not actually know, but I'm pretty sure he does.
Okay, well, we don't got to worry about it too
Right.
much. The point is, he does still have the Terra. That's going to be a huge deal for getting off this really important final Draco Meteor in order to finish this game.
Right, especially with that Terra Dragon, giving it a little bit of extra boost.
Which, I mean, you can never complain about with Draco Meteor.
Absolutely not.
Oh, and that is a one-hit KO. Very, very, very
Yes.
well played by Jackson.
What
I think
a
that
great
was such a
game.
good game to watch. Like I said, I think the Dondozo was ultimately the key to beating the Goodra, but I'm really excited to see, what this means and what this bodes for round 3.
Right, exactly. I'm almost certain we're going to be getting a lot more life dews in round 3.
Yeah, I mean, both of their, Colton especially, I really enjoy how he tends to use, the HP restorative, both moves and ability of Sinestcha. And, he's keeping his guys in the field for a lot longer. But the only thing is he's not getting his, he's not getting as much offensive pressure when he's doing that, when he's focusing so much. And I think ultimately that's what cost Jackson, or not Jackson. That's ultimately what cost Cole the game here, was because he was so focused on healing things. The Goodra, it wasn't doing much in order to actually take stuff out. And maybe, perhaps, he could have realized that and just gone for Machagachas much sooner.
Right. And I don't know. I do really feel like that switching it up and bringing Dondozo and Tatsugiri was so pivotal for Jackson, because getting all of those, additional stat raises, I feel like is so important, especially when you're going up against something as bulky as Hisuian Goodra, who normally will just eat physical attackers for dinner.
Absolutely, yeah. And so I think that's going to be a pretty interesting thing. I'm really, really interested to see ultimately perhaps what role Ogerpon's going to play in this final round. I think Ogerpon just has so much use against Dondozo, where Dondozo has so much use against the rest of Colton's team. I feel like Colton should be able to see that and deal with that, as such. And then, how will Jackson rise to then deal with the Ogerpon as well?
Right, exactly. And now we're going to be getting into our final game of our Swiss rounds, seeing who will be able to win this final round. Will it be Jackson or Colton?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do see finally the Galarian Moltres comes out. I'm pretty excited about it personally, but, it is threatened a bit by the things that are currently on the field.
Right.
It's definitely a very strong start for Jackson, considering just how much all of his mons deal with everything else that's on the field currently.
Yeah, that Galarian Moltres does not seem too happy that, like, double fairy types are on the field.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we'll see how it goes, but it does drop that poison type, and that could be pretty dang useful for dealing with these little fairy types.
Yes, and now I'm assuming Grimmsnarl is going to get up a light screen,
Absolutely.
and
Now we're going to see, obviously we're seeing a bunch of special damage. Now, all of Colton's mons are going to be able to deal with this much better, and I think this is a very good adaptation for Colton.
yes, I definitely think so because...
Oh, man, that Grimmsnarl takes a good bit more damage than I would have expected, but I'm very much so impressed by that. We're going to have to see exactly how this goes down.
Exactly.
Colton, he's got a bit of the speed right now. He's really doing a good bit in terms of what he needs. Both of his screens are set up now. His guys are bulky. He knows what he's doing. He's in a very strong position at the start.
And that Grimmsnarl is going to be KO'd, but that Galarian Moltres is also going to be getting that speed drop.
Yeah, and it's sticking in, but that speed drop actually could be pretty lethal when it comes to Galarian Moltres, as I do believe, it needs to rely on being faster in a lot of things. That's what it does typically struggle with, is that it's not always that much faster.
Right.
So we're going to have to see exactly, what it's going to be able to do.
It does go for that Nasty Plot, though, which could prove very pivotal for Colton having a strong special attacker is set up.
With how bulky it is, it doesn't surprise me, though. It's a pretty good, it's a pretty good move for it.
Right, and now that Ogerpon is going to be coming out on Colton's side, and I do not think that Ogerpon is going to want to take an Icy Wind.
No, but also Icy Wind really, we see it already. We've seen the screens. Icy Wind with screens isn't going to be doing much to anything. Like,
That is
even
very
if it
fair.
is super effective, it's even with super effective, it's just chip typically. So
Right.
we just got to see ultimately, how Jackson plans to play around the Ogerpon and deal with the Ogerpon to ultimately, potentially, clear the way for his Dondozo. I don't actually know if he has that in the bag, though.
But honestly, in these kind of matches where it's a match of screens and bulk, every chip damage matters.
Absolutely, yeah. We're going to see that Sylveon eat a Air Slash, and that's definitely going to be rough. The Sylveon, she's on her last leg, but she still is pretty fast compared to everything else over here, at least compared to the Moltres. But Ogerpon could really, really threaten something here.
Right, but that Ogerpon is going to be switching out into the Sinistcha, and it will be able to heal up the Galarian Moltres just a little bit with its hospitality ability.
Yeah, and that's what I can, Colton is a master of HP, it seems. He's very good at keeping his guys alive. He's very good at keeping them up and feeling good. But Jackson does finally meet with a pretty well-staggered Aurora Veil a little bit before the snow goes down. See Hyper Voice come out and do a pretty significant amount of damage into the Sinestcha.
Oh, but that Fiery Wrath comes out from the Galarian Moltres in.
Oh, Sylveon just barely survives that.
I am loving how bulky this Sylveon is.
I'm loving how bulky both of these teams are, because
Yes.
it's really clever, and you tell they're having to think about it. It's not just it's bulky and they don't think that much about it.
Right.
There's thought behind this. There's reasons behind it. Everything knows what it's doing.
Yes.
We do see Alolan Ninetales get another Icy Wind off onto its opposition, and Sinestcha goes down.
This is such a great position for Jackson. I really feel like that this Choice Spec Sylveon is putting in so much work, but unfortunately the Berserk and the Moltres procs up, but this is actually potentially could be really good for Colton.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, the Citrus Bear bringing it back up. The Moltres, he's still good to go. He's still going to be around for a little while. Sylveon does go down at finally. I mean, that was a bulky Sylveon.
Right,
I'm really
yeah.
not used to that. But Ninetales is able to tank it and, keep on rolling with it. Snow does go down, though, but ultimately that should be fine.
Right, and now Dondozo is going to be coming out on Jackson's side, and that Ogerpon will be out on Colton's side. And I feel like now that the Galarian Moltres has Berserk procced, and now is Nasty Plot procced, or it got a Nasty Plot off, I do feel like that it could possibly be in a really good position.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, Colton doesn't have anything else in the back, whereas Jackson is still preserving some of his stuff in the back. I feel like this is somewhat of a dominant position for Jackson, but it's not over yet. Colton has impressed me thus far with how good he is with his HP management.
And I think Jackson is going to be getting those stat boosts here in a second with that Tatsugiri coming out onto the field. I think this is a great play from him because this is going to ensure that Dondozo is going to be a little bit more bulky, plus is going to be able to attack a little bit better.
Well, and on top of that, he's able to survive in order to get an Earthquake off over onto
Right.
Galarian Moltres.
Right, that's going to be huge.
Big time. I'm really interested to see how this little interaction plays out because, Ogerpon's not going to be doing too much to it unless he Horn Leeches, which I suppose he totally could.
Right, exactly.
Oh, wow. But yeah, Moltres just barely sticks around, and Ogerpon, it doesn't surprise me that Ogerpon took it pretty well.
Right. And I'm assuming, yes, it's probably going to go for a Horn Leech, but it does only a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the Ogerpon is definitely not something that Jackson necessarily always needs to be worrying about, but, you know, it could become a problem, you know, if it was more in the back and stuff.
Right, and that Moltres does go for an Air Slash, probably thinking that the Dondozo was going to tear into grass, which is honestly a pretty, like, decent prediction.
But now it doesn't matter because the Dondozo is faster than the Moltres, and Dondozo can afford to do the Terra Grass, which I think is just, you know, such a well-thought-out play on Jackson's part.
Right, even though it is now, more susceptible to the Air Slash, like, I do think that tearing now is a really good idea, especially with the threat of the Horn Leech from the Ogerpon.
Yeah, it makes Ogerpon a lot less of a threat, and honestly, I think that Jackson's in a very, very dominant position now.
Yes.
He's really keeping his momentum, and he knows what he's doing, and, you know, he's continuing to threaten that Ogerpon. And also, he has screens now. Like, whereas Colton is about to run out, Jackson gets to keep his screens, and he gets to keep on being bulky, and he's Dondozo.
Right.
Dondozo is bulky.
Right, exactly. Even though Colton had his Galarian Moltres set up really, really well, and it keeps on getting that Berserk, I still think this is going to be Jackson's game.
Yeah, I mean, we'll really have to see exactly. You know, Colton has definitely surprised me thus far, because we got to see exactly how it plays out. But we do see Earthquake come into Galarian Moltres and ultimately take it out. So now it's Ogerpon versus the world.
And I don't know how much longer that Ogerpon can hold on, but maybe once screens wear off, it can dish out a tiny bit of chip damage.
Yeah, I mean, it could potentially, like, I don't know, it has that Horn Leech, it could do something, but I do think this is a pretty dominant position for Jackson. He just kind of has to keep hitting the Ogerpon, and it's going to go down eventually.
Right.
And, yeah, I mean, you know, he has the order ups, he's ready to go, bam, and, yeah, like, Ogerpon, he still sticks around, but Ogerpon would really have to do some work in order to take him out now.
Right now.
Oops, sorry.
No, you're good. That Ogerpon now goes in for the Ivy Cudgel, but it still does just a little bit of chip damage, and I do think that it is Jackson's game.
Yeah, Jackson took this game, and yeah, he really played it well. I think it was really rough that game one, and he really managed to turn it around by utilizing his Dondozo and Tatsugiri.
Right.
Which is unbelievably hype for me. I really like to see the two of them do well, and it's really, really awesome to see that, you know, this is Jackson's winning in. He's in, and he took Dondozo and Tatsugiri into our finals. Or not into our finals, but into our top cut. So
what a win it in.
Yeah, absolutely. It was very cool. Both super bulky Mons and both really well played on both, you know, both player sides.
Right. And I do feel like that it was so interesting to see a match like this, because I feel like at least from the matches that, like, I have seen, like, even, like, in this tournament and also, like, outside in, like, regionals and, like, in, like, the Latin American International Championship, like, I feel like it is such a meta, like, even though it is, like, very, like, physically dominant, or, like, plus that it is very physically dominant, it's very, like, punch, 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 and, like, I have to be so offensive.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. But yeah, I mean, it was excellently played on both of their parts, and, you know, what a hype final round.
Right.
And, you know, I'm really excited to see what happens in Top Cut. So, yeah, I mean, thank you guys so much, and we'll be right back.